Picture a vast invisible city that has grown inside you since the moment you first opened your eyes, a metropolis whose avenues are paved with every word you have ever heard, whose skyline is stitched from the silhouettes of every hope you have ever entertained, whose alleyways still echo with the footsteps of every fear that ever chased you home after dark. At the very center of this city stands a citadel whose outer walls look weather-beaten and unremarkable, yet whose inner chambers are larger than any empire you can name, because they are built from the raw material of your own attention. Most of the city's citizens, the versions of you who rush to catch trains of thought, who haggle in the marketplace of opinion, who loiter outside the cinema of nostalgia, rarely notice that the citadel even exists. They are too busy chasing the next bright advertisement for happiness that flashes across the screen of the mind. But the Buddha's invitation has always been the same. Leave the noisy boulevards, climb the gentle slope of your own breathing, and step across the moat that separates reflex from reflection. Once inside, you will discover that no insult can pierce the heart that has learned to stand at the still center of its own storm. No loss can steal the peace that has discovered it is not an object to be guarded, but a quality of spaciousness to be inhabited, and no storm can shake the ground beneath the feet that have remembered they are resting on the living earth of the present moment. The first corridor you enter is hung with tapestries that depict the river of time, but the river is not flowing left to right, as in ordinary maps. Instead, it is flowing straight toward you, a shimmering ribbon of liquid memory that curls like a question mark at your toes. Behind you, the water that has already passed is nothing more than the wake of your own footprints dissolving in sand, while ahead, the water that has not yet arrived is only a rumor of possibility carried on the wind. The only place you can actually stand is on the small wooden pier of this inhalation, this exhalation, this heartbeat that is already different from the last. To anchor yourself here is to learn to feel the texture of the pier's planks with the soles of your attention, to notice the faint tremor of each nail as the river of thought presses against the pilings, to smell the wet cedar of the moment before the mind races off to the next imagined season. Practically speaking, this means that when you are washing dishes and the mind begins to replay yesterday's argument with your sister, you deliberately drop the storyline and return to the warm water slipping over your knuckles, to the slippery resistance of a single bubble that refuses to pop, to the small sound of porcelain clinking against steel. It means that when the future arrives disguised as an unpaid bill, you do not board the train of panic, but instead remain on the platform, feeling the soles of your feet inside your shoes, feeling the breath move like a slow tide between the small harbors of your ribs, knowing that no thought about tomorrow can survive the gentle scrutiny of the present. When you have learned to stand on the pier without leaning either upstream into regret or downstream into fear, you are ready to enter the second corridor, whose walls are lined with shelves made from the driftwood of all the things you once believed you could not live without: the job title that was supposed to make you respectable, the relationship that was supposed to make you complete, the opinion about yourself that was supposed to protect you from ridicule. Each object is labeled in your own handwriting, and the labels are surprisingly fragile. They flake like old paint when you touch them, revealing that the wood beneath is already turning back into the salt and sand from which it came. Letting go is not a dramatic gesture of renunciation performed on a mountaintop. It is the quiet decision to open the fingers that have been gripping the story of how life ought to look, to feel the cool air rush into the spaces between your bones, to watch the sand of every assumption pour through the open palm and return to the beach where it began. It is to write the resentment on rice paper, to read it aloud once with tenderness for the wounded hope it represents, to float it in a bowl of water and watch the ink feather into abstract clouds until the paper itself becomes pulp, and then to pour the pulp onto the soil of a houseplant so that even the bitterness is composted into nourishment. And yet, even when the shelves are half empty, the mind will still manufacture new objects to clutch: tomorrow's weather, another person's approval, the illusion that if you just try hard enough you can prevent all future pain. This is why the third corridor is carpeted with silence, a silence so thick you can feel it pressing against your eardrums like the hush before a snowfall. Here you learn the difference between reaction, which is the automatic flinch when the world pokes you, and response, which is the deliberate movement that arises after the mind has taken 3 breaths to consult the deeper archives of your values. The Buddha once compared anger and insult to gifts wrapped in ugly paper. If you refuse to accept them, they remain the property of the giver. But if you grab them eagerly, you must carry their weight home on your shoulders. Practically, this means that when the email arrives dripping with sarcasm, you do not immediately stab the reply button. Instead, you close your eyes, feel the small storm of heat in your chest, name it without judgment: anger, hurt, embarrassment, and then ask the simple question, will this matter in 1 year, or even in 1 week? More often than not, the answer is a quiet laughter that dissolves the urgency as surely as sunlight melts frost. The 4th corridor smells of cedar shavings and morning rain, because here you are apprenticed to the invisible carpenter who builds strength not by hoisting weights, but by shaving away the unnecessary. Every small act of self-control is a curl of wood falling from the plane, choosing to rise 15 minutes earlier, to sit in silence, choosing to speak only the part of the truth that is kind as well as accurate, choosing to abstain from the gossip that masquerades as bonding. Each choice seems inconsequential, but over seasons the shavings pile into a fragrant hill that becomes the floor you stand on when the hurricane of circumstance arrives. Neurologists now tell us that the prefrontal cortex literally thickens with use, like a muscle that grows stronger each time it lifts the weight of temptation and sets it down again. The brain you were born with is not the brain you are doomed to live with, provided you are willing to practice the daily geometry of restraint. When you have walked far enough down the 5th corridor, you come upon a lantern that hangs from a hook so high you cannot quite see how it is attached, and the flame inside it is the color of honey in sunlight. The lantern does not ask whether the traveler is deserving, it simply shines, because it is in the nature of light to be indiscriminate. Compassion without attachment is the art of becoming such a lantern, of learning to give warmth without keeping score, to offer guidance without needing to be thanked, to love the difficult person not because they have earned it, but because withholding love would dim your own flame. This is why the monk who saved the drowning bird and released it did not hope for the bird's gratitude. He hoped only that the sky would be big enough for safe flight, because his happiness was not a ledger that needed to be balanced by the bird's return. The 6th corridor is a room of mirrors, but they are not the cruel mirrors of self-judgment that line the dressing rooms of adolescence. These mirrors are made of polished obsidian, so dark, they seem to drink the reflection rather than offer it back. And in their depths you can watch every thought arise, like a bubble from the bottom of a still pond. Insight meditation is the practice of sitting quietly until you can see the bubble's entire life cycle, the tiny pop at the surface, the brief ring of ripples, the return to glassy calm. After weeks or months of watching, you begin to notice that the pond itself is not disturbed by the bubbles. It is vast enough to hold them all without changing its nature. And in that recognition, the mind becomes the pond, vast, deep, and unshaken, while thoughts continue their innocent choreography of appearing and disappearing. At the far end of the 6th corridor, a spiral staircase rises and descends simultaneously, a Mobius strip of practice that returns you to the 1st corridor at a higher octave, so that anchoring in the present is no longer a technique you apply, but the ambient music of your nervous system. Letting go is no longer an effort, but the natural exhale after every experience has been metabolized. Choosing response over reaction is as automatic as pulling your hand from a hot stove. Discipline is no longer a duty, but the way an oak tree stands in every wind. Compassion is no longer a virtue you strive to remember, but the default climate of the heart, and insight is no longer a peak experience, but the ordinary transparency through which daylight falls on everything equally. You may descend again into the marketplace, the hospital ward, the bedroom where grief is unpacking its bags, but now you move from the center outward, carrying the citadel within you, like a seed carries the memory of the whole tree. One day, perhaps years from now, you will find yourself in an airport lounge delayed for the 3rd time, the baby still wailing 2 rows ahead, the Wi-Fi still down, your phone battery now at 5%, and the old circuitry of irritation will begin to hum. But before it can fully engage, you will feel the soles of your feet inside your shoes. You will notice the cinnamon scent from the stranger's roll drifting past. You will hear the baby's wails soften as its mother lifts it to her shoulder, and in that small symphony of sensation, you will remember that you are not the passenger being delayed, but the awareness in which the delay is happening, not the person whose plans are ruined, but the spaciousness that can hold both plan and disruption, without preference. You will close your eyes for 3 breaths, and when you open them, the gate of the citadel will still be open. The fountain will still be murmuring the same sentence it has whispered, since before you had language to understand it. Everything changes, yet here is peace.